Good evening. We wish to welcome everyone in attendance and all those viewing remotely. My name is Paul Caruccio, Chairman of the Winthrop Republican Town Committee, which is sponsoring this community event along with the Winthrop Sun transcript. First, and most importantly, this is a nonpartisan event. This event is about community and not about politics. The goal of this evening is to make the community aware of the the MBTA 3A rule and to inform the public about how it will impact Winthrop. MBTA 3A is probably the most impactful issue the community has confronted in decades. This issue does not have a political affiliation. 3A impacts the entire community equally. Second, all of our elected leaders were invited to attend and to participate. This includes our state senator, who unfortunately didn't have time in his schedule to discuss this issue with the community this month. Gratefully, we are truly honored to have many dedicated elected leaders here. We're grateful to have our community member and state representative, Jeffrey Turco, with us this evening. I also want to mention that the dedication and sacrifice that our two representatives are making, Jeff's wife, Melissa, is having a birthday tonight, and he's spending it with his community. So I think that deserves a round of applause. Melissa, I suspect you're watching remotely. Happy birthday. We are also honored to have Winthrop Council President Jim Letterie. President Letterie will be addressing the audience along with Representative Turco. When I first reached out to both of these representatives, they eagerly accepted the opportunity to address you, and we need to take advantage of it, and we'd be grateful to have you. The agenda tonight is simple. Representative Turco and Representative Letterie will speak briefly about 3A. Next, we will take written questions from the audience. Our honored representatives will answer as best they can. If you wish to ask a question and you haven't, or while the program is going on, you wish to ask a question, please reach out to one of the Winthrop Republican Town Committee staff members in the back of the room, and they'll have you put it on an index card, and I will ask the questions to the representatives. We will take this meeting till approximately 9 p.m. and adjourn then, and let Representative Turco have some birthday cake. So let's get to it. Representative Turco, would you please start and please explain 3A for Winthrop in your words?
Yeah, so the MBTA Communities Act was passed a couple of years ago, right before after Speaker DeLeo had resigned from the House and before I was elected in the special election. So there was a time period where Winthrop didn't have representation in the House. Governor Baker came out and declared that we had a housing crisis in the Commonwealth, that we needed to build more housing, and we needed basically to force communities to revisit their zoning to make it possible to create more housing. And so Governor Healy has then come in. Obviously, she inherited it. It had become the law under Governor Baker. He pushed it. He signed it. Governor Healy came in and decreed that we need 225,000 new housing units across the Commonwealth in order to address the quote-unquote housing crisis in the Commonwealth. Anybody that has kids that want to buy a house today, you can't afford to buy a house around this area. Let's face it, there's a problem with prices and value, But, I mean, that's, I think, been the unending crisis that's gone on forever as prices go up. So the MBTA Communities Act, what does it do for us here in Winthrop? So it would require the town of Winthrop, and Council President Letterie, who's been a great partner, can talk about nuts and bolts because he lives it every day at the town level, because they're the ones who have to adopt it. But the Communities Act, essentially what it would do is force Winthrop to rezone at least two parts of the town to allow for multifamily housing by right. And as part of doing that, it would lower the threshold to approve that. Right now, the Zoning Board of Appeals approves projects by a vote of 2/3. This would lower it to 50% plus one. The mantra of those that, I'm opposed to the law. I want to be crystal clear. I think it's bad for Winthrop. I think it's a bad fit for this town. I think it doesn't recognize the good, thoughtful efforts at development that Winthrop has done over the last 20 or 30 years. It doesn't acknowledge, at least at present, the development that's in the works in the town, that's, again, smart for Winthrop. And it doesn't recognize the fact that in our area, I represent Winthrop and half of Revere. Revere is build, baby, build. And that's a choice that the elected officials and the people of Revere have chosen to do, and that's okay. The Commonwealth should be supporting Revere in its efforts to build. But it should also be respectful of towns like Winthrop that say, we want to build, but we want to do it in a more thoughtful, deliberative way. And so, I'm sorry if I'm running a little long on this, Paul, but I do think this is really important. 881 or 882 units of increased capacity is what the Commonwealth is saying that Winthrop needs to zone for. Now, yesterday, Governor Healy, in response to a different political issue, was on Twitter and said, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them, words to that effect. Well, this bill, this legislation was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor because they believed at the time that we have a housing crisis and we need to build. When people tell you this is only about zoning and it doesn't mean you have to build, that's nonsense. The one part's true. They're going to zone for this in Wellesley. They're going to zone for this in Weston. They're not going to build one single multifamily house in Weston and Wellesley with this. But what they are going to do is go to working class, blue collar communities like Winthrop and try to jam it down our throats. And so, and I know that's aggressive language to some, but I truly believe that our elected leaders need the support of you, the public, at the local level to say, we want our voices to be heard. And that's why the Milton lawsuit that's before the Supreme Judicial Court is so critical to decide where this goes in the future. Sorry for running on.
Thank you very much, Representative Turco. Council President Letterie, would you care to speak about the status of Winthrop when it comes to the MBTA 3A law, or current status?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you. And it always seems I'm always following the representative, and it's not an easy thing to do. So, but as Jeff said, it's very clear what they want to do, right? So they want Winthrop to create zoning for 882 additional units. They want more density in communities. They want more multifamilies in communities. Winthrop is unique in a lot of ways. A lot of cities and towns think they're unique. We truly are, right? We have one entrance, one exit. We saw over the last couple of weeks with the storms we've had, what kind of disaster it can be to try to get out of town in the morning. I feel, and as the representative stated his opinion, I am dead against this as well. I've been very vocal about that. I just feel that we have the ability to run our town the way we see fit and the way we want to grow, and I think we're doing it in a very responsible way. Over the last 15 years, we've created zoning. We created the waterfront district, which is part of the Atlantis Marina now, and also down by Delby's Corner, down to the Winthrop Yacht Club. We also, more recently, created the Center Business District. Those two units combined, we feel, have the potential to create about 700 to 800 units. So I feel that we should be the poster child for what the state wants to do. We were just ahead of the curve. We shouldn't be punished for doing the job that they want everybody else to do now and have to do it again. That's my strong feeling on that. Also, when you're talking about zoning and talking about creating more units, you're also talking about consequences. Everything has a consequence. So if you're going to create more units, you're going to need more public safety officers, more fire, more police, more DPW, school space. We're incredibly fortunate, and thanks to the community members for voting for debt exclusions to build 3 schools in the last 22 years. However, they're pretty much at capacity now. So then we have to think what's going to happen with that. There's already a teacher shortage going on. So there's a lot of consequences that come with this zoning to me. There is no extra funding that comes with the zoning. So it's not like, okay, if you zone for 882, we're going to give you an extra 10 million in state aid every year. That's not going to happen. We've been trying to be good partners with the state and trying to listen to them. They've listened to us. But the fact of the matter to me is I have a constitutionality issue with this. I feel it's unconstitutional to tell the cities and towns what to do. Now, they'll come back and say, well, we've done that with 40B, we've done it with other things, but it doesn't mean it's right? And again, there are consequences that we have to be aware of and that we have to be ready for. But the fact that we've already done this, we are the 5th most dense community in the state. Sometimes different statistics, you could look at 1, you could look at 9. We're in the top 5 for density, right? We have over 12,000 people per square mile. The average number of 2-family or multifamily homes in a city or town in Massachusetts is 30-something%, where it's 66%. So we are what they want everybody else to be. So we shouldn't be punished again for being proactive, doing the right thing, understanding our community and growing in a responsible and effective way. Again, I am dead against this and be happy, as Jeff is here as well, to answer any questions you might have to the best we can.
Thank you both. This question you pretty much have addressed, but I'm going to read it anyhow, and if you want to add a little bit to it, you can. Haven't we already met some of our quota for housing?
The answer is yes and no. The way this works is before December 31st, the town of Winthrop has to adopt a plan under the current law, has to adopt a plan presented to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. That agency will then review the plan to determine if what Winthrop has proposed for its new zoning districts, which we would be required to have 2 as the present, present analysis. If Winthrop's, they would determine if we met that standard. If we did, then we'd look at Winthrop could go back and, very recently, we had a meeting with the Executive Office and talk to them about all the different projects that have happened and are in the pipeline. And there's some hope that some of those projects will get counted towards the ultimate goal. And though she's not here, and I know some are upset, I will give credit where credit's due. Senator Edwards, as chair of the Senate Housing Committee, did push to get the meeting with the town and the Secretary Augustus, and that meeting did happen yesterday. And so, so I just want to point that out.
And I also feel that, to me, and again, what we're saying is the districts that we've created should be accounted for in that 882 units. My issue with that, though, is does the Center Business District become 3A zoning if they allow that? And that's a big thing. There's significant differences between the CBD and 3A zoning. 3A zoning is not, the state is adamant about we need more housing. We're in a housing crisis, 220,000 units. But this is not, and they talk about affordability, but this has nothing to do, this law has nothing to do with affordability. It is not building 882 affordable units, it's building 882 units. But the zoning is different than the CBD zoning. CBD is basically mixed use, right? We want commercial, and then we want to build residential on top or whatever. We want to spread it out. This does not do that. So my concern also is if they allow us to use CBD zoning as part of 3A, does now the CBD become 3A, which changes some of the issues down there. We got to be cognizant of parking, as everyone knows, and we're not that much different than other cities and towns, but we have a significant parking issue in Winthrop. So you just want to be really careful about what you do, but I feel that we've already met our commitment, and I'm hoping that the state agrees with that.
Thank you. Representative Turco and Council President Letterie, based on your perspective, is there any rational way to navigate out of this situation?
I think the short answer is, we don't know. Milton is fighting the fight for everyone. for 176 other communities. You know, what's important is that 177 of the 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth are required to comply with this law. But one of the communities that's exempt, which just goes right through my craw, is the city of Boston's exempt. You know, I mean, it is so offensive, and I hear people say, well, Boston's done its part, Boston's had a boom. Here's an interesting little fact. 1950 United States Census, the city of Boston's population was over 800,000 people. Today, Boston, 2020 census, Boston's population hovers around 700,000. When Boston goes back to 800 plus thousand, then come and tell me that Winthrop needs to do its part. I mean, Boston hasn't done its part. Their population is lower, not higher. And, to me, it's just, we need to take a stand. But how do we get out of this? We get out of this by hoping that Milton has a successful run before the Supreme Judicial Court. If Milton doesn't win in that court case, there are still some avenues, but frankly, I think if Milton loses, then the game's over, except the law requires the standard, the vote. Anybody that's seen the Board of Appeals or the Planning Board vote on things, the Board of Appeals right now needs a 2/3 vote. You know, if this passes, or if the SJC, Supreme Judicial Court, upholds the law and Winthrop's forced to comply with it, in a worst-case scenario, the Commonwealth gives no credit to Winthrop for any of the 881 or 82 zone units, then the defense against it is this guy and whoever holds his seat, because the council president in this town appoints the members of the zoning board and the planning board. It is critical that when local elections matter, and people need to go out and when depending on what happens with this lawsuit, when the local elections happen in this town and the other 176 other towns in the Commonwealth that are dealing with this, you need to go out and you need to ask people that are running for council president, where do you stand on this? Do you think we need 880 more units? And will you commit not to put people on the zoning board and the planning board that will jam this down our throat? Because they still will have the authority, albeit at a lower threshold. But that's where people have to keep their eye on the ball. Because if you get a planning board and a zoning board, people that say, build, baby, build, you're going to get a different community.
This is supposedly a one-size-fits-all, so this is a zoning for every city and town, and everybody's treated the exact way, and you just can't do that. We are so much different than other cities and towns that are in the same issue. Now, there are many others, and we heard yesterday that there were 5 or 6 that had their town meetings, and they all approved them, and they just went on. But there are cities and towns like Wellesley and Weston that are doing this, and the property values are so high, it just doesn't make sense. So they'll zone for an area, and they'll say, okay, but the developers don't want to come in and spend $3 million for a lot of land because they know that it's economically unfeasible. So that's why I think it's a lot easier for other cities and towns. We're just unique in a lot of ways. And the fact, and we mentioned this yesterday also, that we have so much building not only in Winthrop going on potentially, but around us, right? We have Suffolk Downs, which over the next 10 to 12 years potentially is going to have 11,000 units. If there's 2 people per unit, that's another Winthrop right outside. Let alone the traffic issues and everything else. I mean, we can't be treated the same, and we have to be adamant, and we have to stick together on it.
Thank you both. The next question, with all the development in this region, why the force of 3A? It seems irrelevant now. We are a very different state now than we were in 2021. 220,000 more units on top of the current building rate is reckless. And would you like to respond to that?
I'll go first. I do agree. I do agree that, as Jeff said earlier, if you're a young person getting out of college or in your mid-20s or early 30s, I don't know how these kids buy properties right now, right? It's extremely difficult. And if you tack on top of that interest rates are at 7, 8, 8.5%, I don't know how they do it. But this, again, doesn't address affordability. This is just addressing more. We want more. And it's just wrong right now. We just can't continue to do it like this. To have 220,000 units in this Commonwealth right now, who's going to be going to those units, right? I don't know. I don't know where all these people are coming from. There's just so much at stake right now. And again, there's strength in numbers, and I think this is one issue that has brought a lot of people out. It's incredible, the attendance that we have here tonight. I mean, we'll have meetings with 2, 3 people in them, but to see, it's got to be close to 100 people or more here tonight, and that's incredible, and that's a testament to the town and how resilient we can be. It's just such a great little town, and we don't want to see it run by the state.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the notion. You look at, again, I'll use the other half of my district, Revere. From 2010 to 2020, per the U.S. Census, the city of Revere was the fastest growing city in the entire Commonwealth. Population up 20% in 10 years. But yet, with all the building that's taken place in Revere, prices are still shooting up dramatically. Apartment rents are still sky high. When the first building at HYM, 550 units at Suffolk Downs, comes on board, nobody's looking at that saying, oh, they're going to get $1,000 a month and working class kids can afford to live there. I mean, that's just not happening. They're not building. Investors are not putting their money into these properties because they're trying to make these, below market rate rents. I mean, we can go into the philosophical about why this is happening, but we would be here till 3 a.m. doing that. But the simple fact of the matter is we're not going to build our way out of this crisis. We have to do it more thoughtfully. And there's other issues that are coming down the pipeline and this may get addressed later, but there's a housing bond bill that the governor has proposed, $4 billion. And one of the provisions of that bill I believe, is more dangerous to our community than even the 3A zoning. And that is, in Revere, we used to call them in-law apartments. And so the governor has proposed, as part of her housing bond bill, and the House and Senate committees on housing have reported it out favorably, a provision that says every single-family zone district in the entire Commonwealth, by right, must allow accessory dwelling units. Not in-law apartments, accessory dwelling units, up to 50% of the square footage of the house, or 900 square feet. So if you get a 1,500 square foot house, you can make an accessory dwelling unit that you can rent out to anybody, effectively converting your house, in my mind, to a 2-family. And you can do it up to 700, half or up to 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. I mean, that to me is, if you buy your house in a single-family neighborhood, and you want to be able to live in that single-family neighborhood, to turn around and have somebody that went and bought, and now the economy's turned and they're concerned, and they say, well, I'm going to convert my basement into an apartment. I'd like to collect the $3,000 a month rent in my house, renting out my basement, but I wouldn't do it. And I really think that is going to that's very damaging to this community, because it's by right. Period. You could just do it. You have to pass, obviously, safety checks, make sure the windows are the right height and things. But anybody that has a single-family home could do that. Pay it to keep your eye on the ball on that. Let people know in government. Call the governor's office. Call the Senate. I'm telling you, I'm against it. I think that's something that people in elective office need to hear, that the public is concerned about that.
Thank you both. Next question. Winthrop has several hundred buildings, including homes, in the Massachusetts Historical Commission database. How can we protect these historical structures from demolition by developers, especially when many of these are already 3+ family homes? For instance, lead abatement, asbestos removal credits. We must protect our history. So, could you please respond to whether or not historical buildings in the community are at risk with the 3A law?
I mean, go.
Well, my understanding is that they are not at risk. They will still there are still zoning laws that have to be followed in terms of height and setbacks and such. So no, they're not at risk of being torn down, but they could potentially be a 2-family that is now a 6-family.
And they could be torn down. If you have a 3-family home that's historic, however that's designated, and you sell it to somebody, they go through a process where a city and town can't stop you from tearing down a quote-unquote historic property. All they can do is delay you. So, for example, the city of Worcester, there was a beautiful, if anyone's been to downtown Worcester, right next to City Hall, used to be a beautiful French church, Notre Dame church. They couldn't figure, when the church was closed, they couldn't figure out a redevelopment use. They kept selling it to developers. They just couldn't make it work. So they petitioned the city of Worcester to tear it down. It caused a huge hue and cry, and the city of Worcester exercised its authority, said we're going to delay this for a year. But at the end of a year, the property got torn down. and now it's just a memory. So historic properties, I mean, that's the extent that a city and town can protect it, and that doesn't change, that doesn't change because of 3A. That could happen right now.
Thank you. Next question. 3A has been marketed as a means to correct the historic snob zoning in Massachusetts. Good to hear. Why then has the densest and most affordable section of Winthrop been selected for rezoning? Why not the maze?
I live in the maze, so I'm opposed to that. Hell no, we won't go. But on a serious note, I mean, no district's been selected because the town hasn't moved forward with this. The council has, to its credit, the council hasn't rushed into this thing. The council did have a consultant. I watched it on television like everyone else did, unless you were at the meeting, see the proposal where they talked about the beach area being one of the 2 districts. And then they kept calling it the Center Business District, but they clearly didn't understand Winthrop. These were outsiders whose job it was to tell us, here's how you become 150% compliant, instead of saying, here's what you need to do the minimum to comply. And so they kept calling it the Center Business District, but they're actually talking about all the residential homes around the Center Business District is what they wanted to designate. Fortunately, the council put the brakes on that process, in large part, I think, because the people of the town rose up and said, what are we doing? And now I think you're going with a different consultant for phase 2, which hopefully will be more on the town side rather than on the side of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and when they came back to us, the consultant, they brought up 3 zones, right? They brought the beach area, they brought what they called the CBD, which was actually all the residential around the CBD, and they also brought forward the potential for Main Street, so from Pleasant Street all the way down the Crest, all the way down to McGee's Corner, and it would be every house basically on the corner on Main Street. And but they brought up the potential zoning would have been for 2,250 units instead of the 882 that we are required to do. So why would we want to do 2,200? We don't even want to do the 882. So now we do have another consultant on, but we want to be sure, we're hoping that the state's going to come back with different numbers, so we want to make sure that we're doing. And the other thing that's a big part of this is the acreage, because you have to have X amount of acres included, right? So we're trying to get the acreage reduced. Because you would think, potentially, if somebody had to do 800 units, you could potentially zone for 800 units on Shirley Street, on the beach area, basically from Shirley to Veterans and all the finger streets in between. And let's say there are 500 units there now, you zone for 800, you're really netting out 300 or whatever. But because of the acreage requirements, you can't even do that. So they really, there was very interesting, I think it was Salem that recently proposed a plan, they approved it, they sent it in, they got approved, but at the end of their approval letter, it stated that any potential changes that come forward, we can require you to change as well. So basically what they're saying is a lot of cities and towns are trying to, paper comply, right? So comply in an area, like we're gonna zone a golf course or whatever, which that's not the case, but you're gonna do something that's gonna meet the law, but it's not really gonna be buildable. And so basically what they're saying is any way that you're trying to skirt the law, if we figure out the correct way to undo that, you're going to be held liable for that. So there's no grandfathering in, there's no, well, I already did it, so you can't change the law. Yes, you can. So that was very concerning reading the Salem ruling on that.
Thank you. Another question. Is there a priority to protect from mass development? As we have learned from neighboring towns, density doesn't always equate to accessibility. It's a question from Precinct 1.
So again, the name of this law is the MBTA 3A zoning, right? It's not the Commonwealth of Mass 3A zoning. So, and it affects MBTA communities or adjacent communities, communities that are close to the T. So why is this happening? Is this happening to create a customer base basically for the MBTA, right? So, and which is just going to create more density. And I hate the argument that, well, in 10 years, nobody's going to have a car, or, everybody's going to walk, or everybody's going to ride their bike, or whatever. That's not, my viewpoint is that's not going to happen. People are going to have cars. There are way more cars now than they were even 10 years ago. And if you look at Winthrop too, going off a little bit, but if you look at Winthrop, we went back to 1960 and looked at the homes, single-family homes, multifamily homes in 1960, and we looked every 10 years up until 2020. And we have increased, and again, we don't have space to really increase. It's mostly redevelopment and sticking something here and there, but we've increased our multifamilies by over 60% and our single families by 25%. So we've increased, but again, we just have so many multifamilies that it just makes it so hard, and we're so dense as it is. This density is a huge problem for the town. But again, looking at where the communities that they want to do this are communities that are going to, if you have 220,000, now you have 220 plus times 1.5, so you have 350,000 additional customers for the T, potentially, right?
Thank you. This question is to either one of you gentlemen. It says more housing, yes. What assures more affordable housing?
Under this law, nothing. I mean, there is not an affordable housing component to this. There are programs out there, you know, I'm a carrot, not a stick guy. I think the Commonwealth, if it wants to encourage more housing, we ought to use the economic resources of the state to encourage cities and towns to build. One such program that the Commonwealth has and has had for decades is called Chapter 40R. And 40R says that, so take, for example, the old middle school site. If the town wanted to redevelop that site at some point and put in a mix of affordable multi-family units there, they could go under 40R. The state will provide financial resources, tax benefits to the developer, tax benefits to the community per unit, but there'd be a requirement, I think it's 20% threshold. Every unit would, or 20% of the units would have to be affordable. So again, that's something that each community, that's a carrot that the Commonwealth offers. Not many communities choose to participate in that because they don't think that the carrot's big enough. So to me, if the Commonwealth wants more building in that area, they ought to go and, you know, and create a bigger carrot to make it work. You know, I'm working with one of my colleagues, Rob Consalvo, former Boston City Council from Hyde Park, on some incentive programs to help expand the base for communities that want to allow development and want more, particularly on the affordable side, to say the Commonwealth should put its money where its mouth is and help to make that a realistic goal. And so we're working on a bill that hopefully will be part of the housing bond bill that will increase those incentives. Again, larger stick, you know, a larger carrot, less stick.
And again, we say affordability is not a part of this. However, I look at it, and another concern I have is, you know, housing is expensive. Again, one of the reasons is because there's no supply, right? So if you create supply, do you decrease the price just by supply and demand, right? If there's more, are you going to decrease it? So now you have people that have worked here their whole lives, they've lived there their whole lives, they're getting ready to retire maybe or whatever, and they have a property that's worth a lot of money. So why would I want, you know, 10 or 1,000 more units coming in, which could potentially deflate the value of my house or your house or whatever? So even though there's not an affordability component, I just go by the theory of supply and demand, saying the more supply you have, potentially the housing prices will go down. Now, we look at the city of Revere, and it doesn't seem like it's going down over there, and they've created an incredible amount of units over the last 5 years. But even though there is not an affordability component to this, I get concerned just with more supply potentially could lead to lower prices or lower values, property values for our residents.
Thank you. The Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities and some local elected officials claim there is a mass housing shortage of 220,000 units. However, Massachusetts is experiencing an exodus of residents at a rate of 4,400 citizens per month. Furthermore, using government data, there has been one housing unit permit issued for every 1.4 new residents of Massachusetts. This doesn't make sense. Do you know how mass livable communities can support their shortage claim?
I mean, to me, I hear the number, and I think it's about, you know, I mean, analytical people go and they sit down and they try to do the analysis saying, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Why are people leaving the Commonwealth at a rate of 4,000 a week, whatever the number is? People are leaving because, again, our kids, I got a kid who's a freshman in college. Another few years, he will not be able to, he's going to be an aerospace engineer. He will not be able to buy a house in this area. That's a reality. And so the question is, where does he go to be able to buy a house? To me, the Commonwealth should put its resources towards expanding high-speed rail. There's been talk, we call it east-west rail. Out in Springfield, they call it west-east rail. You want to create housing opportunity for people, build a high-speed rail that's effective, that doesn't give into politics, that goes Boston to Worcester to Springfield, and then goes off of that through bus service and other areas, regional transit authorities. Now, all of a sudden, you get young working families that can go out and they can buy a home in Ludlow, Mass, and still work in Boston and be on the high-speed rail to Boston in 25 minutes or 30 minutes. Create reliable transportation rather than saying, well, let's just jam more sort of apples into the basket here. I mean, it's just that's I do think we have a problem. I mean, it's, again, anybody with young kids, you got to look and say, can your kid afford to live here anymore? How many have their kids, that are working full-time jobs that are still living in their home because they can't afford it, right? So, I mean, that's a real problem that we need to address, or your grandkids that might be living with their parents. I mean, it really is a problem, but again, there's so many other issues that we have to address that. I had meetings yesterday with the group when we were talking about utility bills up 20%, in the last year. I mean, that's another reason why people are leaving the Commonwealth. As we make the push towards wind energy and more solar, we're seeing massive price instability. It causes greater inflation. It causes, I mean, I got to tell you, the number of times a senior citizen, a little test, walking in Stop and Shop to grab something, and a senior citizen come up and go, Representative Turco, do you see how much the price of a dozen eggs is? I can't believe it. It's off the housing issue, but my point is, why are people leaving? Because the cost of everything is going through the roof, and we are pricing people out. And building 225,000 units is just going to, nobody's given me an analysis that says that's going to create an equilibrium that's then going to soften the market and lower the prices. I haven't seen it. I do think where you have a huge amount of land out in central and western Mass that hasn't been used, I went to UMass Amherst. I mean, I've seen it. You go out there and you put high-speed rail out there, and I truly believe that could be transformative to the Commonwealth. And, let's hope that happens, because I think that'll solve some of this.
Yeah, I think the representative makes an incredibly good point, because, again, we're talking about potentially they want to create 220,000 units, and it's an MBTA thing, so they're gaining more customer base for the MBTA. The MBTA is pretty packed as it is right now. You get there early in the morning, you're standing up, there's no seats for everybody. So what are they gonna do with all these people that are potentially gonna be new customers on the T, right? They gotta build, and then this leads to infrastructure work. Not only infrastructure, if you're building more units, you need bigger pipes on the ground and all this stuff, and we know in Winthrop we have failing and aging infrastructure that we're trying to address every year, and you can see by the traffic. But again, they need to think about, it's kind of like, I don't want to bring up another subject, but like the electric cars, right? They want to build electric cars, but we have no charging stations. They haven't worried about the grid and how it's going to affect electricity costs and such. It's the same thing here. We want to build the units first, and then we got to worry about how to transport people back and forth. So like the representative said, to figure out a way of transportation, a high-speed line to go out to the western part of the state where land is not an issue. We think everything's crowded like this, but you go 50 miles outside of here, and it's a lot of open space out there. So why can't we build the infrastructure first and then try to expand it? So same thing, same comments.
Thank you. Question is it true they cannot take school or road fund grants away?
Well, I'll give my opinion, and Jeff could give his facts. So, my opinion is you can never say they're never going to take everything away. The fact, I think, is it's very hard. That's our money coming back to us, so I think it's very difficult. I think what they have addressed is the potential for grants and the potential for losing certain grants. And they won't say you're not qualified for them, but basically you're going to be on a very low priority list. The other thing we've learned is that there's potentially another pile of money, so to speak, that will be given in a grant type basis to towns that do comply with 3A zoning. So obviously you wouldn't be on that bucket list, but I don't see any way, shape or form where they would reduce our Chapter 70 money or, that's basically our tax money coming back to us. So I don't see that happening. The representative might have a different viewpoint.
You're spot on. The law, as it's currently written, does not allow for either Chapter 70 school funding or Chapter 90 road project funding. Does not allow the Commonwealth to touch those funds. What it does do is certain housing-related. What's interesting in Milton, one of the first things they did, everyone we talk about, and we didn't talk about this earlier, but we did yesterday, was the climate change, climate resiliency issues too that Winthrop faces. Anybody sees, because I know you see quite well, the water problems that we have. We get a little bit of rain and half the town's underwater now, and it's the same on the Revere side down in Beachmont. My phone rings off the hook about it, and so that's another thing. Maybe we ought to address some of those issues before we start trying to pack even more people in here, because once they shut that tide gate in Revere, and now everyone's trying to get out through East Boston. Forget. And then the brilliant people in East Boston want to make Bennington Street one lane each way. I mean, it's like it really is. It's just bizarre land. So I don't see. But I brought all that up because in Milton, one of the first grants that they rescinded was a grant for seawalls. So I thought, I thought that was, I'm still trying to figure out where they put seawalls in Milton, but I guess I don't know my geography well enough, but they had seawall grants. All right, the good Reverend Walt is telling me there is some small water base. You must own that land there, do you? So, right. So no, I don't, unless there's a change in law, you don't have to worry about education or roadway money being rescinded.
Thank you. I have another question, but I do want to recognize, and I didn't acknowledge her earlier, Councilwoman Suzanne Swoop is in the audience, and we thank you for attending and being committed to the community. The next question is, will there be a community advisory council assembled to inform and include the community in the process?
There's no advisory council right now, but that's not a terrible idea I will say, and again, you could tell by the amount of people here, that the information is getting out. The concern that I always have is that the correct information gets out, right? Like, there's always misinformation that's out there, and I think these meetings are fantastic. I get concerned sometimes when you just create more committees, there's potential for more misinformation to get out. I encourage you to come to council meetings, call counselors, call me anytime. And if I don't have the answer, I'll tell you I don't, and I'll try to find it for you. But we have to, and this is like it's not ever changing necessarily, but nobody knows. I mean, yesterday, nobody knows the actual answers. What's the penalty if you don't do it? Well, it could be this, it could be that, but there's no definitive answer. Well, what if you do it? Does that mean you have to? Well, you don't really have, there's no definitive answers in any of this. And it's learning on the fly. It's like, having a kid get a two-wheel bike and just pushing them and saying, okay, go until you fall. And that's the problem. Nobody knows. And again, going back to consequences, nobody knows what the consequences are going to be. There's consequences to everything you do, especially in Winthrop now with flooding and everything else. Now you have to build higher. So if you build higher, like we did at the high school and like we did at Miller Field, we build higher. Now you have houses on Franklin Street getting water that never got water before. Is that because, you're building the topography higher, so now that water's got to go someplace? But as far as an advisory committee, there is nothing on tap right now, but if somebody has a really good idea, I'd be happy to listen to it.
Thank you. Can our public services, such as police, fire, schools, DPW, possibly support this?
Support it in terms of agreeing with it, or support it in terms of...
Support it as far as, apparently, I think the question asks is if we have 882 more multifamily units, can the infrastructure of Winthrop, police, fire, safety, DPW, support such an increase?
Well, the simple answer is no. I mean, could it, as it's currently constituted? No. Can you add fire, police? Yes, obviously you can. And I think that would be sufficient in some ways, because right now we have Center Business District, there could potentially be close to 500 units, 400 units. So if that came, now again, it's gonna come, and the whole thing is to develop prudently, right? Not to develop and just have these massive developments like my esteemed representative's district in Revere does, and it's just incredible how many people come in at once. We're much more small increments, but no, schools, we are basically, in, I don't want to say capacity, but the middle senior high school was built for 960 odd kids, and there's 1,100 kids in there now. Now, are they packed in like sardines? Do they not have any room? No. But you're going to get to the point where you don't have enough classrooms, right? You might have the space a little bit, but you don't have enough classrooms. You don't want 30 kids in a class and say, we could do this. You want to keep class sizes in the high teens or low 20s, so the education is still as good as it could possibly be. So no, I mean, the simple answer is no, it's currently constituted. I do not think we could support an additional 882 units on top of what we'd already zoned.
Thank you. The next question is, where are the land parcels located to accomplish this?
Again, we had a consultant that gave us 3 potential areas. Now, this can't be town-owned property, right? So we can't say we're gonna zone Ingleside Park or the middle school, because that's town-owned property. You can't use that as part of 3A. So it would be districts where, again, it's not just fresh land that we're gonna build potentially 882 units. It would be an area like, like Shirley Street, right? So all the finger streets on the beach where there might be, again, 400 or 500 units there now, you zone it for 800. So instead of having 2 families and maybe a few singles, now you're gonna have 4 and 5 families and 3 and 6 families or whatever. So you're just making it denser. That's the whole point of this, to have more density. The state doesn't want the big, beautiful one family Victorian houses. They want the big, beautiful Victorian house that can house 6 to 8 families. And that's where I have a major issue with this.
Yeah, I mean, again, you hit it. I mean, we have a limited amount of land. Interesting enough is the U.S. Census has Winthrop at 1.99 square miles. I think it was Councilor Aiello pointed this out to his credit. And Tom Riley. Actually, it was Tom Riley at Joe Aiello's meeting. So thank you, Tom. But he pointed out that the census says Winthrop is 1.99 square miles. We've always said 1.6 and change. And the Commonwealth has used the 1.99 square miles from the census to determine that we have a density ratio of people at 9,000 and change per mile, per square mile, where when you, as former Council President Riley pointed out, if you back out that 0.4 of a mile that is part of Logan Airport's runway, then we are one of the top 5 most densely populated communities per square mile. So I facetiously said to Jim, let's designate that the end of the runway as for high-rise apartments and solve this problem. But they got us beat with the language that you can't use municipal land. So, but I mean that's something that we're pushing to get them to correct and say, because that changes all their numbers if we can get them to do that. But that's why, to the point of whoever asked about the citizen advisory, that's why it's so critical for people, citizens, to get involved in this stuff, because it was Tom that, sitting on the sidelines happily in retirement, that sat there and looked and said, this doesn't make sense, these numbers, and went and looked at them. So we owe a debt of gratitude to him and to Joe for having the meeting.
Thank you. Next question. The original purpose of 3A was to build housing near transit. Will you be reaching out to Winthrop's bus-dependent residents for input on whether an area is truly transit accessible?
That was, again, if you look at the consultant and the 3 areas that they put, they were on T routes, right? And that's the other question that we asked. You're trying to have this so we can help the T, yet the T is now taking 1/6 of our town, and they don't want to go after the Winthrop Yacht Club, after the landing. They're not going to go any further down into town. So they want us to help again, but they're taking more and more service away from us. So that's another issue. But yeah, if you look at the consultant and what they were looking at, they were specifically looking at bus routes, right? So you could build units along bus routes. So again, it would be easier because nobody's going to have a car. So everybody will be able to just take the bus out of Winthrop. So yeah, I mean, I think that is something that is absolutely being looked at by these, the people that are trying to help us by looking at MBTA routes specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you're spot on. I mean, it's a challenge. The MBTA is part of they looked at their routes, and they did this count of how many people are they use the buses, use the trains, and they made the decision, and both Senator Edwards and myself are working to try to get them to revisit the issue to stop the bus routes. It won't go down Point Shirley anymore. It'll stop at the town landing. And we're saying, you know, what about a senior citizen that's gonna walk in the dead of winter or in the dead of summer when it's, you know, blistering hot, and they need to get, you're saying we're supposed to be an MBTA community, but yet you're gonna tell these people you don't matter, go ahead and endanger yourself, you know, going there. So we're working on trying to get that revisited by the T. And their argument is, oh, well, there's higher usage in other parts of town, and by not going there, we'll be able to increase the usage somewhere else. I'm like, well, you know, let's not forget the other people that are using the service. And so, you know, that is certainly a challenge that we're working on. A little off the question, but.
That's good, thank you. I'm going to put these two questions together because they're asking about legal questions. So is Winthrop involved in any legal action? And can you explain the 2A lawsuits, the two 3A lawsuits?
Well, I'll say that Winthrop is not involved in any lawsuits right now in terms of 3A.
So I'll give you the sort of 30,000 foot view, because, you know, I haven't read in detail the Milton. I have read one of the 10 taxpayer suits, I think, out of Gloucester area, but I haven't read the Milton pleadings as of yet because I've been busy with other stuff. And we have until October, I think, before the court does that. So, and again, not to bore you with state constitutional law. So Massachusetts has adopted, I believe in the late 60s, a home rule, early 70s, a home rule amendment to the state constitution. And as part of that constitutional amendment, it changed the dynamic of power between the Commonwealth vis-a-vis its municipalities. And what it said was cities and towns have independent jurisdiction over some areas. And the Commonwealth can't just ride roughshod. And the Commonwealth can no longer say, we're going to zone just for Boston, just for Winthrop, it has to do, you know, when it does something, it has to do it more broader based. And so I think the common law rule was this thing called the Diller rule that said the Commonwealth could do what it wanted. And then the Home Rule Amendment changed that. And so the argument in the Milton case, again, without having read through all the pleadings, the argument essentially says, you know, the Home Rule Amendment to the state constitution gives cities and towns authority that the Commonwealth has now usurped. The challenge with that argument is the Commonwealth did this decades ago with the thing called 40B. 40B of the general laws was an attempt to create affordable housing, and what it said was that if a city or town didn't meet all three these thresholds, density, percentage of your units that were affordable had to be at least 10%. There was one other standard. And if you didn't meet all three of those standards, then a developer could come into your community, commit to build affordable housing, and commit to limit their profit in the project in the name of affordable housing. And then as part of doing that, the threshold, there'd be a super board in the town. Instead of going to the planning board and then the zoning board, you just go to the zoning board. They had full authority to make a decision. The threshold was lower to pass. And if you didn't like what the developer didn't like what they did, you can go to the Housing Appeals Board at the Commonwealth, and they approve everything. You know, and so that was challenged under the Home Rule Law decades ago, and the court said no, the Commonwealth can do that. So I need to look at Milton's arguments to see how is Milton differentiating 40B from 3A. You know, I'm concerned that, you know, that case might be a precursor to, you know, those that got defeated under 40B will probably get defeated on 3A, but I'm not comfortable saying that until you know, and I want to be clear, I'm not a zoning guru. You know, I'm a lawyer by trade, but I'm not, you know, I'm learning more about it than I ever wanted to. You know, but, you know, once I sort of get caught up on those pleadings and probably reach out to the lawyers on both sides just to say, you know, I'm kind of curious, what do you think of this or that? You know, then, you know, I'm happy at another forum to sort of opine more authoritatively.
Thank you both. Another question. Is there support in the House or Senate to overturn this law?
There's a support of one. No, I mean, you know, unfortunately, you know, Speaker Mariano he was speaking to the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, I believe, again, in an exempt city. And the speaker said, every community's got to step up to the plate and do its part to help the housing crisis, and we are not changing this law, period. So, so long as the Speaker of the House is the Speaker of the House, then the law will not change. And though the Senate President Spilka hasn't opined publicly that I've heard, I'm assuming that, sort of based on history, that view carries the day in the Senate as well. And then even if you could flip those two, you're still then going to get through the governor, you know, who supports this. Okay. So I am not optimistic. I think the way, there's two ways to do it, and actually somebody, I don't want to name the person, but somebody sent me an email. There's two ways to do this. One is Milton wins the lawsuit, and that ends it. And two is, you know, a potential citizen initiative petition at the Commonwealth level to put this, we're too late for this year, but to put the question on the ballot for a couple of years from now. I've been involved with one of those things, you know, one of those. It's extremely difficult to get the 78 or 80,000 good signatures across the Commonwealth. That your limit is to how many you can get per county in the Commonwealth. So it's a lot of work, but it can be done. And the fact that 177 communities are affected by this, there could be a critical enough mass to get people to say, you know, we do need to go through. If Milton loses, maybe the lawyers that are looking at the second and third lawsuit might turn around and say, let's put our resources on drafting a question that'll pass constitutional muster, and then let's go out and get this on the ballot. So those are the two options that I see. Milton wins or referendum or compliance.
Thank you. To Councilor Letterie, is it correct that it is your intention not to sign a plan by the December deadline?
To sign a plan? No, I mean, I've been out front in public saying that I am a no to this. I'm one vote on a 8-member council right now, soon to be 9, but a 9-member council which only needs 5 votes to pass 3A, right? So
Thank you.
I am sure something will be coming to the council probably well before December 31st for the council to look at. I think the biggest question right now is, what is that number going to be? Is it going to stay at 882? Is it going to 441? Or is it going to 100? You know, I think that's the first question. I think at 882, it's very hard to get, I would guess, it would be hard to get 5 votes on the council. After that, I can't speak for what the council would do. I've been very clear with my position. I think, you know, every councilor has to do what they think is best for the city and town, right? In our case, for the town of Winthrop. And the citizens have the right to do what they would like to do if they want to challenge it, right? So even if the Winthrop Town Council was to pass something December 30th, and the deadline is December 31st, doesn't mean the citizens can't get a petition in January or February or March, which is what Milton did. They would do last December 31st, and they had their vote this year. So it doesn't preclude the town from doing anything, but so the simple answer is yes. I think there will be something at some point, probably early fall, brought before the council to vote on.
Could I just,
Absolutely.
one more comment on that? It's just, the people of this town will ultimately have the final say, presumably, because if the council, whatever the council adopts, you know, I mean, the feedback I hear, and based on the crowds that I've seen at council meetings and here, people are going to collect the signatures to put it on the ballot and let the people of the community, but, you know, writ large, decide what they want to do. But the one thing I just, and this is more of a sort of a commentary on our body politic nationwide as well as local, is like, some people disagree with me on this thing and they think this is a good thing. That's okay. It's called a democracy. You know, reasonable people can disagree. You get 8 members, soon to be 9 members of the council. Every one of them is a good person trying to do what they think is right for their community. I urge you, go to them and respectfully voice your opinion on why you think this is right or why you think it's wrong, why you think we should resist, why we shouldn't resist. But doing it, like, it's just, you know, you hear all the damn negativity out there about people that are in elective office, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because nobody wants to run for office because they're going to be personally slandered, personally attacked. Like, we don't see that much here, but it's just, you know, people sort of on the internet have the ability to go out there and sort of lose that personal sitting across from here and they'll say things that they wouldn't say face to face. And so I just urge you to say, you know what, some people are going to come down on the council. Hopefully it's not 5, but some people are going to come down saying they support this stuff and they would support a plan, whether it's 882 or 2600. I don't know what everyone's comfort level is, but your response as a community, mine as a voter, is to say the next time I get a chance to vote, I can decide whether I want to check that box or not. So I just urge you to say, like, go to your councilors, give them the strength to say no to this, give them the strength to hear why the public's against it. And then if they decide they support it, that's okay, because they're not elected to do what the majority wants all the time. They're elected to use their good judgment. And then if we don't like their good judgment, just like if you don't like my good judgment, you get a shot at me every 2 years and you can throw me out. So forgive me but it drives me crazy.
Well, thank you for the response, Representative Turco. We appreciate that. This question, you almost have answered it, but I will read it as it's stated. Who can we trust to push back for the good of our community? This would destroy us. And does anyone agree? Who can we turn to?
Yeah, I mean, again, you look to your left, look to your right, look to your front, look behind you. I mean, you got to go to your friends and your neighbors and your family and say, here's why I think this is, like, let's face it, a lot of people don't pay attention to this stuff until it's too late. So, you've got to go out there and you've got to talk to your neighbors and your friends and say, you know what, hey, pay attention to this. You live in a nice single family or a 2-family or a 3-family. Tomorrow it could be a 6-family there. Do you want that? Is that what you want for our community? Why did you choose to come to Winthrop? And so that, to me, that's what you can do, is go out there and, again, respectfully go to the councilors and tell them why go to your precinct councilor, go to your council president, go to your 2 at-large councilors and tell them why you're opposed to this, or tell them why you have concerns about us. Because you may not have, hopefully after tonight you'll have even more info, but you may not have enough nuts and bolts detail to say why you're opposed to this, but you're concerned with the notion that we could add 882 units in the town and say, oh, don't worry about it, it's just zoning, we're not going to build. That's, it's nonsense, just absolute nonsense. So that's it.
Education is just such a big part of this. As the representative said, he's not a zoning expert, he's a lawyer by trade. Well, I'm neither. I'm a cold cut slicer by trade, so zoning is not my expertise, but I've learned as much as I could possibly learn about this, and I encourage you all to do that. And again, like Jeff said, you can't hate somebody because they want to do this. I'm sure they have their reasons, and in their minds it's the right thing to do, and you have to respect that. But I think education is key, and to me, the more people understand this, I haven't heard the big question, anything you do in life, it's like, okay, I want to buy a house. Well, why? Because I want to have a better life. I want to grow equity. I want to be able to set roots. And so I haven't seen what's good for Winthrop to do this. It's one thing just to be told you have to do it. Like you tell your kids you have to eat your vegetables or whatever, and you say, well, you want to grow healthy and this and that. I don't know what good is coming to Winthrop from this. And as the council president, my responsibility is to look out for the residents of Winthrop and look out for what's best in Winthrop, not for today, not for tomorrow, but 20 and 30 years from now, 40 years from now, whatever it happens to be. And I have yet to be told why this is a good thing. I could tell you why it's a good thing to build a new school when we built it. I could tell you why it's a good thing that we need a fire station. I could tell you why it's a good thing, whatever happens to happen, or why we need infrastructure work on streets to prevent flooding. But I can't honestly tell you, well, you know what, you might not like it, but this is the good thing that's going to happen from it. And until somebody tells me that, I just don't understand it.
Thank you both. Since Revere is building seriously, since Revere is building and seriously impacting Winthrop, will the state push illegal immigrants onto us like Woburn and Revere?
I think they're different issues, but I don't see that. Revere doesn't have the the migrants were originally in the Avid Hotel in Revere. There were, I think, approximately 90 of them were put there, mostly Haitians. They since have been moved by the Commonwealth up to Peabody to more centralize the certain delivery of services. And again, Revere has chosen to build, baby, build, and some of it's awesome, frankly. Whether it causes traffic, but I lived on Shirley Ave when I was a teenager, and you were afraid to go out at night because it wasn't you didn't feel safe. And now you go down there, and it's vibrant. There's beautiful new buildings. There's beautiful new mixed-use, commercial stuff in the restaurants. You go on Revere Beach. My wife and I waiting to have dinner one night at Drift, and there was a half-hour wait, and so we sat at Starbucks and got our coffee and sat there staring at the beach. And I said, "This is the beach I grew up with a plastic pail and shovel, and here I am sitting at a Starbucks waiting to go to a restaurant on Revere Beach." It's amazing. But that's what the people over there wanted. We're different. We choose to be different. We choose to do what's right for this town. But again, the migrant issue, I could go on for quite a while about that. The one thing I'll say is nobody in either party at the state legislative level or the governor has asked for this crisis to come to us. It's a complete failure in abdication by the administration in Washington to protect the country. But that being said, and I take some flack over this, just comment, even though it's off housing, I've said I will not vote to put women and children on the street and not house them, and I won't vote not to feed them because it goes against who I am and what I believe in. And so it's difficult. We're spending $1 billion, on this problem, but they're here. And unfortunately, as long as the Biden administration chooses to have an open border, there's nothing we can do except, again, do we leave them at Logan Airport so when you go to fly on a flight, they're all, I don't know. And even some of my most conservative friends, when I talk to them about the issue, and they're like, you got to vote against funding for them. I said, are you going to vote to put women and children on the street? And they said, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. Are you going to vote not? So it's a very complicated issue, and it's turned politics upside down. When I'm in these caucuses with my colleagues, you'd be shocked that people are all over the board struggling to come up with solutions on how to fix it. So again, off the housing topic, but.
Yeah, the illegal migrant situation has affected pretty much every city in town. And it's affected Winthrop in a much smaller way. And as the representative stated, I could go on as well for a long period of time on this too, and I do feel it starts at the top and it starts at the national level, and I'm major, and I just said, as council president, my job is to look out and protect the citizens of Winthrop, and the president's main objective is to look out and protect the citizens of the United States, and I think that hasn't been done to its best ability. And again, it's a situation that it happens, and again, there's not resources. We don't have the resources to bail us out of some of the situation, and that's the problem with a lot of issues that the state enforces, whether it be education reform or certain requirements, mandates for education or cities and towns, but it doesn't come with any funding at all. And the funding is just going in different directions right now, and it's not a good thing.
Thank you. This question is Winthrop willing to go the legal route to defend the community?
I don't think it's the intention of Winthrop to file a lawsuit against the Commonwealth right now, or Winthrop's mission right now is to, through the planning board and through the council, have some sort of presentation that can potentially meet the requirements that eventually will be sent, and hopefully it's much less than the 882, and then see what happens. But it is not the intention for us to get into a lawsuit, but I think it's the intention for us to protect and do what we think is best for the citizens of Winthrop.
And we can thank the people of Milton who have taken the lead in this, and they're going through the time and expense to defend the principle. And again, interesting enough is their board of selectmen, or select board, whatever it's called down there, actually approved the plan. And it went to the people, put it to a referendum, and the people overturned it, but the select board is doing their duty and they're defending the people of their community's vote by challenging this. And I think they deserve, yeoman's praise, because they adopted a plan that ultimately the people rejected, but they're spending the people's money to defend it. So fortunately, Winthrop doesn't have to go through that.
All right. Is there a chance that the Rockport lawsuit against 3A will succeed? And if so, can you speak about it?
I mean, I think this goes back to my early answer, and this is, Rockport is trying to do a 10 tax, so in Massachusetts, there's a thing called a 10 taxpayer suit, where 10 taxpayers can get together on behalf of themselves and others similarly situated and challenge the action of the Commonwealth or a municipality. And so I think by the time a lawsuit like that gets through the pipeline, you draft a complaint, you get your taxpayers that sign up, they sign their affidavits, you file suit, there's 20 or 30 days to file responses. We're going to be in October before any of that even gets to go, and, gets to sort of go on the board. And so, I mean, to me, it's a waste of time and resources. If I were the people up there, I'd be putting all my eggs in the basket of Milton and say, let's file amicus curiae briefs, what they call friend of the court briefs with the court, and encourage the Supreme Judicial Court to give teeth to the home rule provision of the state constitution and say, if the Commonwealth can do this, then home rule means nothing. And so I think that's why this is so dramatic, that it's different than 40B and it's different than 40R and these other different things.
Thank you. This one's, I don't know if this is fair, but to Council President Letterie, are you trying to negotiate down to 442 units? Or
I'm sorry, can you just?
are you trying to negotiate down to 442 units? And if so, why not 0 units?
I was just going to say, I'm trying to negotiate to 0. So that's my goal, is to negotiate to 0, correct?
Thank you.
Yeah, but I think we're trying to be good partners and trying to do the best we can to get the best number, right? The first thing is to change that number from 882. Before we even get to voting yes, no, whatever, we want to change the number. And ideally, 0 is the number I'd like. I'm sure 882 is the number they like. So I do think that there is going to be a movement. I feel confident that there will be movement in that number. But, the state has to look and say, okay, well, if we do move that number, now we're going to get another 100 cities and towns that are going to say, well, we want to move our number. So I understand their position as well. I also feel that the state would like every of those 177 cities and towns to be compliant, and I think there's an understanding there that to do that, there has to be some negotiations in certain situations. My goal is to try to do what's best for the town. I said it 100 times, I don't feel this is good for the town. I am one vote. I am no, but I am one vote, so I still have to consider trying to do the best deal. I just can't say no and walk away, right? And that's what some people said at the beginning, just vote no at the beginning, vote it and be done with it. And I don't think that's what's best for the town. I think what's best for the town is to state our opposition, make sure that they know we're serious about our opposition, try to work the best thing we can, and ultimately, and again, I think the representative said this clearly, ultimately it's a citizen's responsibility, but I encourage you to talk to your councilors and again, just be educated on it, but talk to them rationally and voice your concerns, because there are many.
Thank you.
I mean, to me, I could accept the number of a couple of hundred if they give us credit for the couple of hundred we already built, because then effectively it's a 0, which is what the council president supports. I mean, if you add in the Somerset project, if you look at Atlantis Marina, if you look at a whole bunch of different projects that have been done in this town over the last 20 years, you look at the capacity, you give credit for the Center Business District units that could be built. All of that gets to a number that I think most people would say, you know what, okay, I can live with. The town's already approved it, and the meetings weren't full of people protesting about the Center Business District. So that's already zoned for up to 500 units. And so, but the public, but that was done over years, that was done, the state gave millions of dollars to redo the center business, the infrastructure in the center. I think Russ was the council president at the time, and when that work was done. And so, but that's already there. If we get credit for some of that stuff, then, for every credit they give us, then I'll support that unit. But I think conceptually this is wrong. I don't like the idea that they're changing the vote threshold from 2/3 to a half or to a majority. The overlay district telling us that we have to have two different parts of the community that are done, the fact that they've exempted Boston, the fact that they're trying to tell us, well, we're going to count the 4/10 of a mile that's Logan Airport's runway, but we're not going to let you then zone that. Well, as I said to the secretary, you can't penalize us by adding that land in to penalize us, and then when we say, okay, well, we're going to use that as the solution to comply with your penalty, and you say, oh, you can't use that. Well, no, you can't do that. It's either take it out of our equation and recalculate, or let us use it to solve the problem.
Thank you. What are the two areas in Winthrop being considered for the 3A? Two areas?
Well,
Yes.
the only ones that have been proposed were by people that were trying to help us with this in phase one, right? We got a grant from the state for $10,000, and they put together a proposal. And what they showed was, it was the beach area, so Shirley Street area, all the finger streets off the beach, from the green bars down to the Rotary. Main Street from Pleasant and Main down to McGee's Corner, all the houses that abut that. And all the residential houses that surround the center business district. And looking at their proposal, it potentially zoned for roughly 2,200 units. And again, it met the requirements technically for, obviously it met the 882 requirement. It also met the requirements for acreage, the number of zones and such. So it fit the criteria. I don't think it was anything, and again, I don't want to speak for any other council member, but I don't think it was anything that anybody really felt encouraged with or thought it was even a good starting point. But that was the first bite at the apple, so to speak.
Okay. Those on the zoning board and others wanting to build more additional units, have they given any thought to the additional traffic or the impact on schools?
I'm sure the planning board takes their job extremely seriously, right? So this is an issue that's going before the planning board. It's been there for a long time. This is not something, it's come to the public light much more recently, but it's been around for a little while. I think they also would like to see what that final number is going to be, because everybody's hopeful it's not 882. And I do think they're going to take their job very seriously. They're going to have open hearings, and I'm sure there's going to be very good attendance at those meetings, and people will let their voices be heard. And the planning board will come to the council with some sort of recommendation. That's their job. And then it will be up to the council to decide if Winthrop will put that forward or not.
Okay. Simple question, who's paying for the consultants?
The first consultant was $10,000, and it was paid with a $10,000 grant from the state. The second consultant we just hired, the state gave us, I might be off by a couple of $1,000s, but the state gave us roughly $40,000, and it was $50,000. It was $10,000 difference, so the town had to come up with the other $10,000, which we did. There's 177 towns all looking for, not all of them, but basically some of them have already done this, but they're all looking for consultants. They all got a grant from the state, and we had one person reply to our looking for the grant, right? Looking for the consultant. So we feel pretty comfortable with them, and again, they're waiting for direction from us, which is better than the first situation, but they're waiting for direction from us, waiting on a final number of units that the state's going to feel comfortable with us, and then they will come back with much more guidance from us in terms of location and such, instead of just looking at a map And like the representative said early in this meeting, they didn't know Winthrop all that well. They just looked at a map and went by the law and said, okay, this is what we need. It needs to be zoned around T routes. It needs to be zoned in 3 different districts. They have to have this sort of acreage. Okay, here's what we have. In this situation, we're going to try to drive the bus instead of letting the bus driver drive the bus. So we want to lead with this project.
Thank you. This question is, I'll try to interpret it a little differently. What happens if we are forced to zone and we must shut down the development? Does that open Winthrop up to lawsuits by the developers who try to build here?
Well, I mean, anytime someone goes before the planning board and they're aggrieved of a decision, they have the right to go to court, and so that's the law as it is today. So in theory, if this played out where Winthrop was forced to comply because there was a bad decision in Milton, and the council then, says, okay, we have to comply, we adopt an ordinance that's 3A compliant, and now Jim Letterie is still council president, and he only appoints people that say, I'm not going to grant this stuff. Then developers can then challenge that and say, well, did they apply the correct legal standard under 3A and under the standard variance law about dealing with the topography of the land, and does the dimensions of the land prevent the use of the land, and will this be in derogation of the zoning ordinance at writ large? So I mean, there's a whole but that's the law right now. It would probably give the developers a little bit easier pathway in court, but I think most of them would probably, because the lower threshold, they'd probably win at the hearing level before, because because the reality is it's tough to keep this level of public participation going. If Milton loses its lawsuit and Winthrop adopts a map, 2 years from now, nobody's going to be coming to this meeting talking about this, and by then he'll retire and somebody new will come in. I'm not making an announcement, but I was going to say bring back Peter, but he left me. So but a new council president doesn't feel as adamant, and all of a sudden starts appointing people to the zoning board that says build, baby, build, and now all of a sudden, you have that. So you got to stay vigilant, because the appointing authority is the council president for these boards, and that's who ultimately will decide where this goes if it has to be implemented.
This one here is, can we join with Milton and other communities to fight this like a class action suit?
So, I mean, the short answer is I don't believe you can join it per se. I mean, Winthrop could have, it's got an in-house lawyer, Winthrop could file an amicus curiae brief, potentially, joining the Milton, supporting the Milton suit. In my other life, I was a volunteer treasurer of a house corporation in Pennsylvania. We were aggrieved by a decision of the local borough with a zoning ordinance that they put in. We sued, we went all the way to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and won, and they said we were prior non-conforming use and the borough could stick their ordinance where they want it, somewhere, anywhere but against us. And I will tell you, it was extremely frustrating, because in that case, we spent over $50,000 defending our property rights that we could have used towards fixing our property. And there was 50 other groups, or 54 other groups that benefited from us fighting the fight, and all of them said, good job, you guys are doing great. And we said, hey, you want to help us financially? And I think we got $1,000 from the 54 other groups. So to me, whether Winthrop says we want to show our support symbolically by throwing some money at Milton, or by doing an amicus brief, or doing both, I mean, I don't want to tell you how to spend your money as a town council, but I think that's the good way to do it myself. But I don't think you can join it per se. Oh, I see a hand in the back.
Okay, if you could write it down and give it to one of the members, maybe Stephen or Paul can take it and bring it up.
You gonna take any verbal questions?
What's that?
You gonna take any verbal questions?
No, please write it down on an index card.
I'll get them on the subs, I need 100 cards.
They'll help you write it out and back. I'm sorry. You can continue the response. Okay. Can areas that are in a flood zone be designated building sites for 3A?
I think in Winthrop, everything is pretty much in a flood zone, so, yeah, I think it would be very difficult to comply with the acreage requirements and such and not have something in a flood zone. Yeah, so, yes, it could be. I mean, in a flood zone means that it could be built, it just has to be built with different requirements, right? But it'd be very hard. I mean, we talk about the beach area, and I think that would kind of rule that out, right? So, all Veterans Road, all, down by the high school, Walden Street. It would be very difficult to comply with this as written without being in a flood zone.
And so the fact that it is a flood zone would not prevent having to
No.
adhere to the law, the 3A. Okay. Thank you for that response. This is another one that's asking about services. What is the plan for investments that will be necessary for utilities, police, fire, schools, traffic? Last week, access from Beachmont was closed due to flooding, and Winthrop was gridlocked, and that was Thursday, and of course, we pretty much all experienced that.
Yeah, we mentioned this earlier, there is no financial support that I know of right now that's coming because any city in town complies. And again, I'm only worried about Winthrop, so if Winthrop complied with 882 units, I do not know of any additional funding that will be coming to Winthrop to help support that.
I mean, in theory, there's no state tax money that's coming here, but in theory, if you built 882 new units, then property taxes for those units would go up, and that's called new growth under 2.5, so that's not limited by Prop 2.5, and so it doesn't come under the cap. So in theory, town revenue would go up because the property values have gone up by these new 882 units, if you follow the logic, Again, I'm not sure. I mean, the logic is that they're trying to get you to adopt is that property values will come down. So if they're right, then the more units they get, the lower your property values, and you're not going to get that benefit.
Yeah, and if most of these units are apartment units, you're not going to get that significant increase in tax revenue, and it's not going to be suffice for additional education expenses and public safety expenses and DPW expenses, and then you'd have an increased cost on your water and sewer because you're going to have to do more infrastructure work and such.
Can my house really become a six-family? It goes on without my permission. I'm not sure about the last part of the
No, I
point.
mean, nobody could, unless the town takes people's property by eminent domain. I mean, if you own a single-family home and you want it to stay, in theory, in a worst-case scenario, this thing passes, this thing hits all the single families around homes that, using the first consultant's $10,000 report, what they improperly term the center business district, all those single-family homes around that area, nobody can force you to turn and sell your home to a developer to build a six-family. The challenge is a couple of people in the Winthrop Against 3A group have pointed out, notably online, and correctly so, is if you are the single-family home and the person to your left and the person to your right sells their home, and now under multifamily zoning district, they're gonna turn and put a 3, 4, 5, 6 family on their lot, are you gonna sit there in your single-family home, or are you gonna give in? And frankly, you're gonna start to see the money, and say, well, at what point do I want to be in this house? How much do I want to be in this house versus should I downsize and go to a condo or whatever? Do I cash out my chips now? I mean, those will be decisions that people will ultimately make, but nobody can force you to. There's a great, again, don't always believe what you see on the internet, but there's a great story of some farmland somewhere in the Midwest where developers wanted to build it, and there was this one lady that said, to hell with you, I'm not selling my land. And you see over the decades where they built up everything around it, and there's one strip of land in the middle that's still farmland, and she lived there till the day she died. I'm like, you go, girl. It was just great, so.
She died penniless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it reasonable for us to hope that all the development on Revere Beach and at Suffolk Downs is enough to discourage developers from developing in our small peninsula town, despite 3A zoning?
No, but by virtue of being the representative representing Revere Beach, because with redistricting, I represent Winthrop and about 45% of Revere, which includes the full length of Revere Beach now. So by virtue of that, there's a thing called the Revere Beach Design Review Board. And it was created by legislative act in the early 70s. and the representative from the area is the chair of that committee. And so we, as the chairman of that committee, just a couple months ago, we had this a 250-unit condominium project on, on the Bill Ash side of the beach, closer to our side, that was just approved, and then a 16-unit right next door to that. So, I mean, the build, baby, build is still happening, that mentality. Now, the fact that interest rates have gone up so high, it's changed people's economics. Even at Suffolk Downs, you know, they were supposed to get ready to build their second unit already, the second building already for a pharmaceutical manufacturing space, but because the market has changed so dramatically, that's, I think, my understanding is the next building they build there is a hotel, not pharmaceutical manufacturing, because they're waiting for the market to stabilize. So.
And I, just to piggyback on that, I do not believe it's going to dissuade developers from coming into Winthrop. And if you look at the zoning that we've done, and we're talking about potential 3A zoning, right, for potential 800 or whatever the number of units are. And we did do recently Center Business District zoning. Now, we haven't seen a ton of new buildings, but we have seen Somerset building. We have seen a building on Fremont that's almost ready to be done. We have seen another building on Cottage Park, the intersection there with Somerset and Cottage Park, where there's going to be a proposed development. But there have been purchases of other buildings, you know, whether it be Michael's Mall or whatever it happens to be, where the intention is to develop. So we're, again, ahead of the game in that way, that we do see, you know, it's one thing to say, well, it's 800 units, but, you know, they might not build. And I think the representative made himself clear that if you're going to zone, they're going to come and build. I don't think this is going to dissuade developers from coming. And I mean, you know, Winthrop is still it's still a great place to live, right? I mean, we wouldn't be here all this anxious about it and nervous about it if it wasn't a great place to live. So why wouldn't people want to come here? So we just have to do it responsibly.
Will you file an amicus brief with Milton?
I don't, honestly, I don't know how to answer that question. That's not even something that we've discussed so far. I'm sure it will come up in discussion, but it's nothing I can talk about now, and not because I don't want to, because we haven't discussed it.
If we settle for less units, aren't we arguing against Milton and home rule? If we settle for something other than the maximum, are we?
Yeah, I mean, I think philosophically, you know, you can look at this in multiple ways. You can look at it and say, if you have to comply, you know, you get the best deal you can get. But then you also look at it and say, you know, philosophically, you know, most people never heard of home rule before this law passed, let's face it, right? Or you never heard of it as this big dramatic shift in the authority between the Commonwealth and its municipalities. But now that it's out there, you know, people are more attuned to it. And the question becomes, you know, do you want to give up that? Like, if you give up the argument here, it's the slippery slope. If you give this a fight up today and compromise, then what does tomorrow look like? When you zone for 225,000 units, and you know Wellesley, Weston, and all these other Tony communities, Dover, Sherburne, are never going to do anything. They'll zone for it, but they'll never build a unit. And so now all of a sudden you say, well, we've only built 50,000 units over the last 5 years, so we've got to change it even more so that we're going to force them to build this. You know, and then you say, well, you've already given up the argument on home rule, so what can you fight with now? So, I mean, I'm a guy that believes sometimes you got to die on the hill of principle. And so, you know, I think it's worth supporting Milton, and, you know, though I wasn't asked, if I've talked to a bunch of my colleagues who are getting sort of very anxious about this because they're hearing from a lot of people in their communities, and to the extent that some of them get together and say we should do an amicus as some of the legislators that are of affected communities, you know, I would definitely join in with that. But I think, again, it would require somebody with a little bit more knowledge of specific zoning to make it an effective, you know, I don't want to file a brief to tell you I filed a brief. I want to file a brief that's going to, you know, help move the needle.
I'm going to ask the last question, and I'll make a brief announcement from somebody who, in the back of the room. So how did the meeting with Augustus turn out? And I believe the title for Augustus would be the Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities, Augustus.
Livable community.
livable communities. Maybe a Freudian slip. I'm trying to keep it nonpartisan now.
I think the meeting went well. I mean, I think we got as much out of it as we expected to get out of it. I don't think we went there with them with the thought that the secretary was going to say, you know what, you guys are really nice. I love Winthrop. It's a great place, and you're out. We didn't expect that. We didn't get that. They were very receptive. We had a good presentation. I think the town manager, who really wasn't mentioned here at all tonight, has done a fantastic job. Thank you. Yeah. He's done a great job. He's on he's on the side of Winthrop. He wants to do what's right, and I think we together put a great presentation together, which I think was received very well. They asked us for more information, which we're going to put together. They have agreed to come to Winthrop for a second meeting, and they did say that they hopefully will be able to give us some sort of idea at that second meeting where they're heading. I did hear, again, I think the secretary said that he's got to think about this very seriously, and he's not just looking at Winthrop, he's looking at 177 cities and towns, and I think there was another representative from the state who felt compelled to look at the zoning that we did do and somehow potentially give us credit for some or all of that. So I think we were somewhat encouraged and look forward to the next meeting. We have to do our homework now, and we've talked tonight about, the CBD is zoned for 400 or 500 or 350. We want to get a more definitive number on that. The waterfront district, I feel it's about 350, but we want to get a more definitive number on that. So they want to know that. They want to know our zoning laws a little bit better. So we're going to give them all the information they want, and hopefully, and again, we were told we're one of 177, so don't expect an answer tomorrow, but they're going to get back to us in a reasonable amount of time and look forward to coming to Winthrop and seeing firsthand what we've been talking about. And hope for rain. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to invite him when that tide gate is closed. Yeah. So.
I'm going to end unless you gentlemen have a last word or two, and no need to.
I mean, no, I want to say, I want to thank Paul and the Republican Town Committee for putting this together. Nonpartisan. I think this is a great opportunity to get people together, to hear some of our perspective. Your questions help us sort of hear what people are thinking, so we can go back, and when I'm talking to my colleague on the Senate side, when Jim's talking to his colleagues on the council, and at least a councilor or two are here tonight, those that watch it on TV, hopefully we'll hear the concerns that people are raising, that nobody's out here spreading vitriol. They're very genuinely concerned about their community, and this is a great opportunity to sit and sort of face the fire and hear your concerns. So thank you for the opportunity.
And I also want to thank the WRTC along with the transcript for putting this together. But the biggest thanks goes to you guys, because again, this is an incredible turnout, which is fantastic. Everybody's lives are incredibly busy and everybody has 100 things going on, but to come here on a Tuesday night, whatever night it is, for a couple of hours is really great. And I hope people are going to be watching this and re-watching this. And again, educate, educate, educate. You can't just say, this is ridiculous. You want to have facts and figures behind why you don't feel it's right? You can't just say no without having a reason to say no, if that's what you want to do. And respect people's opinions, but as the representative said, call your councilors, and I'll say, call your representatives, even though they're not voting on this necessarily for our town, but call the state senator, or reach out to the senator, reach out to the representative. He's very incredibly receptive to everyone who reaches out. I've never seen a person in my life that is more receptive. I don't know how he finds the time of the day, so I think you should thank the representative for being here tonight. And for him, I will wish, on behalf of all of us, Melissa a very happy birthday.
Sorry, honey. Happy birthday.
But thank you all for coming.
So I just want to say, myself, as representing the Winthrop Republican Town Committee in the Sun Transcripts as a co-sponsor in this event, how much I learned this evening and how much more I am impressed with two representatives that I happen to personally find very lucky to have in the community. So I want to thank you yet again. So in closing, the Winthrop Republican Town Committee wishes to thank everyone who attended in person and remotely. This will be replayed on Facebook Winthrop Votes, as well as WCAT, and they will play it, and the Winthrop Transcript is going to do a spread in the paper coming up as well. I did have one announcement that Diana Vienne is in the back of the room and can explain to anybody the opportunity to join in a legal effort against the Attorney General. So she's in the back with a dark suit in the dark here, so you can speak to her if you'd like regarding information on that. So we especially wish to thank our dedicated and conscientious elected leaders that have attended this evening. And we want to acknowledge the Winthrop Town Councilors who have attended here this evening. And we want to end with a fundamental principle that it is our elected officials who must represent the values and the wishes of the community. And it is a unified community that will make the best choices for their community. So stay engaged, stay connected, and remember, as Representative Turco said, voting counts. Thank you all.
Skip, you couldn't write down the question?